Hello, my name is Will McMahon. I'm Director of Action on Empty Homes, and I want to welcome everybody to this rally, which we've organised jointly with Homes for All. As part of this first day of action on empty homes, speakers local and national from protests across the country will join us, and they'll each have 3 minutes. We're asking people to keep to time so that we can fit everybody in. In my 3 minutes, what I want to do is make a brief few points before asking Tanya Murat from Homes for All to speak. The first point is, first, we face a national empty homes crisis. Numbers have risen by 20% in the last year alone. Together, long-term empty homes add up to over 500,000 houses without permanent residents. Empty homes can be found in council estates, which have been unnecessarily scheduled for demolition, so left empty for years. They can be found in those shiny new tower blocks we see going up all over the place, which are being bought by buy-to-leave investors as a little safety deposit box for their money and their wealth. They can be found in the growing number of whole house Airbnbs, rentals that are never fully occupied. In London, for example, and this is impacting on cities across the country, but in London, there are 80,000 whole house Airbnbs in London. That's 1 in 50 homes. There's also 250,000 second homes, many in what's thought of as desirable coastal and urban and rural locations. And these drive up rents and house prices beyond the pockets of working people. And both second homes and Airbnb are reducing the number of permanent homes in the housing supply. Now, local campaigners from across the country tell us that corporate and wealth investment in housing is breaking up communities and families across the country. People are being forced out of the areas that they grew up in because housing has become unaffordable. Yet just down the road, there's an empty home, there's an Airbnb, there's a second home that could be lived in. This inequality in housing is growing by the day, and the number of long-term empty homes is a canary in the coal mine about the size of the housing crisis that we face. And this has never been more demonstrated than by the present health emergency that we're all facing. The pandemic has amplified and laid bare the health costs of housing inequality. How extraordinary is it that while the virus was ripping through some of the poorest communities in the country and key public sector workers needed a place to self-isolate, over 500,000 properties were empty. It simply doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense during the height of the pandemic. It doesn't make sense now, and it won't make sense in the future. So, as I said, this is our first day of action on empty homes. It resulted from a workshop, a conference held by Homes for All, and in a few short weeks, took place in February, and in a few short weeks, we've built a great coalition of local and national organisations. We know there are lots of local campaigns and national campaigns who face this issue. So after today, we want to reach out. We want to build a deeper network of local communities and national organisations during the rest of this year to challenge the growth of empty homes in the country. So we're aiming for an event, a second day of action in October, that will insist on asking this obvious question. With over 500,000 homes standing empty, why are there 100,000 families living in temporary accommodation with all the health, social and economic consequences that it brings to those households? It really is, for us, time to take action on empty homes. I'm now going to hand over to our first speaker and our co-organiser, Tanya Murat from Homes for All. Tanya.
That was a fantastic introduction, Will, and it's just so brilliant to be here with you today and with this panel on our first day of action on empty homes. I hope that this isn't the last. Indeed, I'm really excited about building for October. As you mentioned, we're living through a national and international emergency. Coronavirus has killed more than 150,000 people in Britain and has left over 1 million people living with a debilitating disease, long COVID. Some may be disabled for life. This is disproportionately affecting people in working class communities, people of colour and those in front-facing, temporary, low-paid and insecure employment, the people who we rely on to keep society running. What has become clear is that housing is another huge risk factor. Those living in overcrowded housing, the homeless, those living in shared accommodation are getting sick and dying in greater numbers. They can't self-isolate. Many don't have access to outside space. At the same time, as Will said, there are at least 500,000 empty homes. In fact, we know there are many more than that. This time last year, Southwark Defend Council Housing, which is part of the Homes for All coalition, decided to start fighting to bring those empty homes back into use. We've had 4 empty homes protests in the last year, and our 5th empty homes protest is happening today. Last October, we stood outside a Notting Hill Genesis development where a whole block of 108 homes has been empty since 2019. This is on a site where 323 council homes used to stand. We raised the demand, requisition empty homes. Requisitioning was done by the national government of Winston Churchill in 1945. He didn't do it because he wanted to. He did it because he was forced. He was forced to make it easier for councils to take over empty homes to house the families made homeless by the destruction of housing, by the bombing. He was forced by a squatters movement. People entered those homes and refused to leave. We're in a similar emergency today. We must force the government and councils to requisition those empty homes, fill empty council homes and build council housing. This means housing should be provided for people and not for profit. Because let's be clear, we're in a struggle for life against profit, where if profit wins, we suffer devastating losses of life. This is just as true about the struggle for Black lives, the struggle against climate chaos, and the struggle against pandemic disease, all struggles for life against profit. I want to thank Will and Chris at Action on Empty Homes for leading the struggle to get the empty homes issue on the national agenda. I'm proud of the coalition we've helped to build, and I'm looking forward to working with all our coalition partners to build the action even bigger this year. So it's thank you from Homes for All, and it's thank you from Defend Council Housing, and solidarity with all those people fighting to bring empty homes back into use.
Thanks very much, Tanya. That was brilliant. Thank you. It's a great speech. I'm going to push on now because I've got to keep us going. I'm now turning to Steve Turner, who's Unite Assistant General Secretary, who has a long history of campaigning on housing, and we welcome him to speak at this rally. Steve.
Great. Thanks very much, Will. Congratulations to yourself, the team. What a fantastic introduction from yourself and a great opening from Tanya. And I want to congratulate all of those that are out taking actions today on this 5th day of action, of course, but building also for that next day of action in October when we can get out on our streets properly. Now, I'm a trade unionist. I'm a leader, and I've never left my trade unionism at the workplace. I believe that the right to a safe, secure, affordable, warm home is a human right, and it's as important for our members in work as the wages that they receive each week. I came from the Agate estate at the Elephant. The Southwark Tenants Association, the group, the action group there has just been mentioned. I mean, they demolished our estate. Thousands of people were moved on. It's now luxury flats, many of them left empty, of course, no lights on if you travel around in the evening, like most of our inner city areas. And in a sense, it's class cleansing. It's a deliberate act to move working class communities outside of our inner cities. And that has a huge impact, not just on the people themselves, ourselves, our families, our children being shifted away from their schools and their friends, but for key workers trying to deliver key essential services inside our city centres. It's just becoming impossible now to not just to live, but to work and to travel in and out. And this housing crisis is not new, of course. It's been with us for decades. It's in towns, it's in cities, it's in villages. There is no community that is unaffected by it. As Will introduced this session, he mentioned 500,000 homes that are left empty, of course, and 100,000 that are in overcrowded a temporary accommodation. And that's a real smite on our society in 21st century Britain. Don't tell me that the 5th richest nation on our planet can't look after the vulnerable, can't provide a home for each and every individual citizen that needs one, and protect our families. It's obscene the way that housing is seen as an investment and not an absolute need in which people can live in safe, secure, affordable accommodation. We've got 1 million people on council house waiting lists, and of course we're mired by that private sector insecurity, the poor quality of accommodation, the lack of regulation, high rents, the level of eviction, the failure to license that whole industry. And of course, as we recover from COVID and rebuild our economy, there's an opportunity to address this. We can build that 1 million new council homes. We can requisition and compulsory purchase those empty properties. We can tax out second homes. We can end council home sales. We can reclaim land banks. We can free councils to borrow money, and we can democratise housing. This is our challenge. That's what I campaign for. So get involved today and ongoing. Build for that October demo, and solidarity to everybody taking part.
Thanks very much. Thank you for that. Thanks, Steve. Our next speaker, and as I was going to push on, and I really am, is our next 3 minutes is from John Bird, who is really welcome to this event. He's the founder of The Big Issue. And John, you've just unmuted yourself. Crack on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you very much for asking me. It's very interesting for me because when we started The Big Issue back in 1991, 30 years ago this year, we got involved with the Empty Homes Coalition, which was a very, very broad church and included lots of conservatives and even included the government. And they got very, very excited about it under John Major's leadership and Sir George Young. Unfortunately, it went the way of a lot of initiatives because, as you know, if you want to kill something off, what you do is you turn it into an initiative and then you rub it down and are nice to it and kind to it for a particular period of time, and then you abandon it. And this is exactly what happened to the Empty Homes Coalition of 30 years ago. And the same thing, live above the shop, all those empty places that are above shops also went that particular way. So sometimes when you do get governments or political parties blessing you and following you and praising you and saying how wonderful you are, it can be the kiss of death. What I'm really interested in about this is because we are now in an incredibly dangerous place, and also possibly a place that could be very, very fruitful if we can create that solidarity. That's the solidarity that we need across rough sleepers, homeless people already, sofa surfers, people who are stuck in homelessness already. And also the other thing that is coming down the line is the possibility that with about 2 million people who are going to be made unemployed by the end of the COVID period, we may well have such an enormous amount of people who will be registering themselves as homeless if the government doesn't do anything about it, because of the fact that they've been evicted because they couldn't pay their rent or their mortgage. So we're in this really, really dangerous place. And that is why we need solidarity across the trade union movement. We need it across Parliament. We need it across every social group that is in any way interested in the social justice issue of homelessness. I am probably the oldest git in Parliament anyway, who has gone through homelessness, because I was homeless at 4, 5, 6 and 7, and as a young man and as a runaway and all sorts of stuff like that. And I've been involved in this campaign to do it. What I would like to say is I would like to offer the opportunity of the big issue, the work that I'm doing in Parliament, which is about dismantling poverty. But also bear in mind that there are historical reasons why we have a shortage of housing. And that is not always the shenanigans that we have in Parliament and in particular governments. It is the fact that we are a low wage economy. We are a low-wage economy. We have a low-wage health service. We have a low-wage education system, and we produce low-wage workers. And this is leading to a situation whereas there's a low-wage, there's a low wage investment. So what people are doing in order to make money are shifting all of their assets into housing. And in Britain, it is absolutely extraordinary that 78% of all money lent by banks is lent in the buying and selling of property. So therefore, if you want to make money, the only crown jewels in Britain is the property portfolio that you can build. Compare that with Germany. In Germany, only 20% of money that is lent by banks is actually anything to do with property. So we've got these really big, unfortunate engines of social injustice that are at work with us. And if we want to, talking about Black Lives Matter, I find it really interesting that the Black Lives Matter movement has brought our awareness of empire and what was happening hundreds of years ago right into the fore, because it was to do with the empire. It was to do with the struggles that we've been through. We need solidarity more than anything. We need it from the person who's sleeping in the doorway to everybody through to Parliament, to all the comrades who are gathered here today, all the people who are totally and utterly committed to this idea of bringing social justice to all of us. Thank you very much.
John, thank you very much. Thank you very much, John. That was great. And we gladly accept the offer. Let's build an alliance together, yeah? And let's sort this issue out. Fantastic. And to give even more life to it, we're going to go to Southwark for a live stream now. Southwark, let's come in.
Yeah.
You're on.
Hello, welcome to Southwark. We're at Manor Place, a development that was built on what used to be a refuse bin depot, and this development is an example of exactly what is wrong with the so-called regeneration. With so-called regeneration, what this is public land that's been sold off to Notting Hill Housing, Notting Hill Genesis, and Notting Hill Genesis are renowned for building developments with hardly any social housing. We can see there's empty property here. This block has got 20 empty homes here. Why is that empty, that one? Prices start here at 557,000, up to 82,000. Impossible for any working class people in the area or local people to live here. This is a borough that's got over 14,000 on the waiting list, 3,500 in temporary accommodation, with many families being homed outside the borough. What the pandemic has shown is that people are at more risk of catching COVID and dying due to overcrowding. Now, Southwark, why is this one empty? There's another empty. There's another empty. These are all over Southwark. These are all over Southwark, these empty properties. Southwark officially has 2,500 empty properties, but we know that that's much higher. There's enough properties to home those people that are in temporary accommodation. We could do that today if Southwark Council requisition these homes. As you can see, a couple of minutes down the road, we've got the Elephant and Castle, Developers Paradise. It's the destruction of the Elephant and Castle shopping centre. They've built thousands of homes at the Elephant and Castle, but none of them are for us. None of them are for working class people. But we're fighting back. Days like today. So let's carry on fighting to get them filled. Demand that Southwark requisition homes and turn them into council housing. Let's keep fighting for homes that are for people, not for profit. Homes for people, not for profit. Homes for people, not for profit. Not for profit. Over there. Homes for people.
Not for profit. Homes for people. Not for profit. Homes for who? Homes for people. Not for profit. Homes for people.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Southwark. Brilliant.
Stop requisition. Stop demolition. Stop requisition. Stop
Excellent.
demolition.
I'm going to move us on now. Thank you, Southwark. That was fantastic. We've got a film from Rochdale now that we're going to cut to. Some campaigners in Rochdale.
College Bank Estate, known as the Seven Sisters, has stood at the very heart of Rochdale town centre since the late 1960s. It creates the iconic skyline immediately recognisable as Rochdale. Comprising 4 larger blocks and 3 slightly smaller, around 750 properties occupy a site which is close to all amenities. Mainly social housing with a percentage of leasehold homes, the towers offer a range of 1-bed, 2-bed and studio apartments built to spacious standards which would be the envy of any location. However, around 250 flats currently stand empty. Rochdale Borough-wide Housing want to regenerate the area by moving residents off and away from the estate and town centre and demolish the 4 large blocks. This would mean the loss of 480 homes on this estate alone. The housing crisis in Rochdale was reported on in a Manchester Evening News article of the 21st of February 2020. It highlighted a shocking report by consultants FutureGov, which warned the borough's housing services were at a tipping point. It stated that the increase in demand for temporary accommodation is being met by putting people up in B&Bs. Rochdale councillor Tom Besford stated, "We have a massive need for social housing, and the fact we have the Seven Sisters over there, I still find it astounding RBH is considering knocking some of those blocks down." The report, published before the impact of the pandemic, also states the reliance on B&Bs is a symptom of a system that isn't acting early enough to support those threatened with homelessness. Councillor Meredith, another critic of RBH and their plans, said that around 2,900 people were on the waiting list for a 1-bedroom flat, yet RBH had ceased renting out apartments at College Bank. With 1,800 empty homes across the borough and an overall waiting list of around 7,000, can Rochdale really afford to leave these homes empty?
Great stuff. That's a great film from Rochdale, and they've been campaigning really, really hard over the last few years to keep those homes occupied, and we're completely behind them on that. I'm going to push on now to our next speaker. It's Ellen Clifford, who is from Disabled People Against Cuts and is a well-published author on the subject. Ellen.
Thanks, Will. Actually, there was a lot more I could have said on housing, but there wasn't space in the book. So I bring you all solidarity from Deepak today. We fully support action against empty homes. Housing is a basic human need, and yet hundreds of thousands of people are homeless in this, the 6th richest country in the world. Figures from 2020 showed 25,000 homes in London being left unoccupied, the highest number since 2012. But at the same time, there were 56,000 London families reliant on temporary accommodations between April and June of 2019. Many disabled people who do have a roof over their heads are, however, living in unsuitable accommodation due to the chronic shortage of accessible properties. And that's why there were disabled people housed on the top floors of Grenfell with no way to escape in case of fire, and thereby effectively condemned to death. One of the victims to die in this horrific way, Sakina Afrasiabi, had been placed near the top of the 24-storey block by Kensington and Chelsea Council, and they threatened to remove her from the council housing list if she'd refused that offer. According to government figures from 2016, there were 365,000 disabled people in England with unmet housing needs, and the average waiting time to be housed in accessible accommodation over 2 years. In one case heard by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, it was actually 20 years. When journalist Frances Ryan started talking to disabled people for her book, Crippled, about their housing needs, she came across examples such as a wheelchair user washing in a paddling pool in his kitchen with a hose because he couldn't use his bathroom, a mother falling down concrete steps carrying her son's wheelchair, a young woman forced to use a commode in her living room because the bathroom was upstairs. In 2015 to 16, 49% of households in the social housing sector had at least one disabled member. Yet when the government's green paper on social housing came out, it basically omitted any mention of disability and access at all. And we know that this government won't do anything to help us. They're not going to do anything to increase availability of accessible housing. They won't do anything about evictions. They won't do anything about empty homes because they're happy for landlords to profit while the most disadvantaged in society struggle and suffer, unless, as Tanya said, we force them to. A few weeks ago, before the news about the passing of the royally scrounging Duke of Edinburgh, an issue came up to do with housing, and one DPAC member had tweeted, "Let's take Buckingham Palace. Surely Philip can't do stairs anymore, so they must have made it accessible in there. There's plenty of room for disabled people in there." And that brought a smile to my face, but the DPAC member was right, that we need action over empty homes, and we need it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellen. That's a really good speech. And I think it takes us neatly on to another issue of profound housing inequality that's been demonstrated over the last few years, which is what happened at Grenfell. And I'm going to ask Moyra Samuels, who's a Grenfell campaigner, to speak to us for 3 minutes on that really key issue. Moyra.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and a really significant, I think, campaign. And well done to Southwark for launching this. We could really have done with this campaign following the avoidable atrocity of Grenfell. We're in Kensington and Chelsea, the richest borough, some say, in the universe, with 3 billion in reserves. How could 72 people burn to death because they chose to buy cheap flammable cladding? I think Kensington and Chelsea has long had a reputation for being the home of sultans, rich football managers, and in a report by Emma Dencourt, where she actually talks about, writes very well about this being the most unequal borough. For us, we remember that actually after the fire, hundreds of the survivors and those who were evacuated were housed in hotels. They were left there, some for up to almost 18 months, because there was allegedly nowhere for them to go. But actually, what were the actual statistics with regard to empty homes at the time? We know that Jeremy Corbyn called for requisitioning homes, and this was considered to be, a completely ridiculous idea. But so many of us who lived in this area long enough could point to large empty homes, that we knew were could have been used, could have been occupied, let alone the palace down the road, in Kensington, that we thought surely we can go off there and actually people could be put there. What we do know is that in Kensington and Chelsea, this incredibly rich borough, there are 2,200 people on the waiting list to be housed. Yet there are 2,600 properties that are there for Airbnb. There are on top of those statistics, is the shocking figure of that there are 6,000 empty properties that are registered just as on the basis of tax. So this is a borough massively unequal. where there are masses of empty properties. You know, even before the Grenfell Tower fire, what was used to be the Commonwealth Institute, where our children went, was turned into the Design Museum, and they, as part of that, they built a block that was owned by one family, and that remained empty even after the fire. So the fight for decent and safe homes continues within this borough. And the fight for safe homes continues. We know that the council will be going to take the stand in the coming weeks. And actually the question of their decision-making with regard to housing will be called into question. We also know that 4 years on following the fire, the wards that have been most impacted following COVID, one of them, there are 3 wards in the borough: Colborne, Colville and Nottingdale. And Nottingdale is the ward that the Grenfell Tower was in. So how is it that actually after this atrocity, after massive investigations, inquiries, the government intervening, that we still have these high levels of deprivation? And we know why that is, because actually this council is, its focus in terms of investment is not north of the borough. It's not for the working class communities that live in North Kensington. It's not for the black and minority ethnic communities that live in North Kensington, but the focus is on south of the borough. And, you know, we now have huge campaigns going on across the borough where there is the continuing demolition of, you know, council estates that have been there for generation, and, you know, the regeneration that continues. And we're hoping to join together into campaigns and to join the Homes for All campaign, because you are inspirational in, you know, allowing us to actually see how we can move forward and we can get decent and safe homes for everybody in this rotten borough of Kensington and Chelsea. So do join us in giving support to the core participants, the residents who were not listened to when before Grenfell, and which is a key reason why Grenfell happened. When they go and give evidence this week, please try and support them in any way you can, and come down to the inquiry when the councillors who made these decisions that led to Grenfell, so that they can hear our voices loud and clear, that we demand safe and decent homes for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moyra. Thank you. Really, really appreciated. Just before we go over to Haringey and then Nasser in Tottenham, I've had a couple of messages of support. We've had one from Leeds branch of Acorn, who say, when filled, empty homes can fulfil people's lives. We believe that advocating and actively pushing for decent and secure affordable homes for all, free from exploitative landlords and agencies, is essential for creating a society that emphasises people's needs over profit. Housing is a human right. Acorn Leeds branch. So thank you to Leeds Acorn. And also we've had a message from Meteor, which is Manchester's independent media. And they say that they will be reporting on this rally actually and on the day of action, which is fantastic because Manchester's got huge problems with housing, as we know. They say the wasted resource of 640,000 empty homes across the country in the midst of a housing crisis is a national scandal. Greater efforts must be made to bring these homes back into use, providing secure and affordable housing for the increasing numbers of households forced to live in substandard temporary accommodation. So thank you, Manchester Meteor, for that support. We're now going to go over to Haringey for the live stream demo there. Haringey, you're on.
Oh, hello, Will. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Burnham speaking from Haringey. We're outside Apex Gardens, which is a new and empty building in the middle of Tottenham, and this is here for two main reasons. One is to make profits for Granger, the corporate private landlord that owns this building and also owns another empty building we were outside yesterday. That's the first thing. And the other thing is to gentrify the area and make housing conditions worse for ordinary people in this area. So the problems which people have got in this area are that they're overcrowded if they've got housing, and the housing is too expensive, and the housing is insecure. Those problems are going to be made worse by this development. When this development opens up, supposedly it's going to open up in June. When this development opens up, it's going to make things worse for people because house prices will become higher, because retail prices will become higher in the area, and private rents will become higher as well. So people that are able to buy a home just about here, are able to rent just about here, will tend to be pushed out of the area. They'll be pushed out beyond the North Circular, be pushed out into some dreary suburb somewhere else, etc. And we're not going to allow that to happen. We're not going to allow that to happen, and therefore we are demanding that this building should be occupied. It needs to be occupied by tenants and residents. It needs to be occupied by local people in housing need. Now, when this got planning permission, there were some questions asked about, shouldn't it have affordable housing in it? Shouldn't it have some affordable rent in it? And the Granger said, oh yes, it's going to have some affordable rent in it. It's going to have some low-cost rent, don't worry. But it then turns out that the affordable rent is not council housing, it's not even housing association housing. It's run by a subsidiary of Granger, which is an unregulated housing association. So in other words, they're going to cherry pick the tenants that they want, not the people in housing need. They're going to cherry pick the tenants that look good, look nice. They're going to allow them to make money. And when it comes to how much they're going to charge them, they shouldn't charge them more than 80% of market rent. But as it's unregulated, what do you think they're going to do? We don't trust them 1 minute about that. We don't trust them one little bit. So in conclusion, this is a building that's going to be open formally in June, we understand, and we're going to have a welcoming party to ensure that this building is occupied. It needs to be occupied by residents and this council and the Mayor of London, whoever that is after the 6th of May, needs to take steps to make sure that that is the case. So thank you very much. And now over back to the studio.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Haringey. That was fantastic and kept to 3 minutes. Everybody's been amazing, actually. So the next speaker we've got is Jon Glackin from Streets Kitchen. Big record on working with homeless people and taking action. John.
It's very, very good to be here amongst so many great groups and individuals, and actions are occurring across London. And I came here, I didn't really know how to prepare for this, like have a speech or something. It's good because it just showed how we've been adaptive, and it showed, I mean, we've talked a lot here about solidarity. I mean, solidarity is not a word, it's actually an action. It's working together, it's communities coming together. I mean, that's what has been shown through this whole pandemic. I mean, it's the mutual aid groups have been the heartbone of, you know, keeping people alive and keeping families fed in the local areas. You know, it's been very heartening to see. And even on the streets, it's been grassroots groups, not charities, grassroots groups out there, from faith groups, from political groups, from all sorts of groups coming onto the streets and actually feeding people, and actually through direct action. I mean, we've got people who are occupying buildings, who are trying to house people through the squatting movement. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and there's people, and something like today where we're actually all together, you know, we're working together. Because I mean, we work with street homeless. I mean, street homelessness is the very tip of the iceberg of the homeless problem. It's the very tip of the problem that we have in housing, you know, this profit making for developers. I mean, developers, I mean, they are developers, they're developing for profit. I mean, we do need to develop communities, and that's where we're reclaiming. I mean, 966 people died in the UK in 2020 because of the lack of an address. They died homeless. I mean, those people could be saved. We could use those empty buildings. They're just sitting there empty. I mean, we took a building about 3 years ago, Sophia House, and very quickly we turned it into an emergency shelter, and we'd up to 180 people there. I would safely say that saved lives. There's so many empty buildings there we could take. We've got people ready to go, we've got the communities ready to go, and we need the councils to step up And a number of them have. I mean, if you look at Islington, for example, they are pushing for council housing, which is wonderful to see, but we don't see that everywhere. So we need to be pushing that there. So as I say, this is really good to be here. I mean, today we've also got Kill Bill. We've got a lot of actions coming on the streets. We have to get that out there. I mean, in our opinion, I mean, Streets Kitchen, I mean, every outreach we do is a protest. It's a protest against, food. It's a protest against the lack of food provision. It's a protest against the Tories. It's a protest. It's trying to keep people alive. So I mean, let's get this protest back again, and let's get active on the streets again. And it's great to be here amongst many people, and let's hope we can do something with this. I mean, we've got support of Streets Kitchen for any actions or anything that we can do together. I mean, it's heartening to have the Grenfell people here. It's heartening to have people in Haringey. It's heartening to have people all over London here today. And let's keep this up. So, I mean, thank you for inviting us here, and thank you for keeping this campaign going, and let's keep it going. And let's keep going. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much. Great speech. Thank you. Thank you for your support. It's really appreciated. I'm going to push us on now to Manchester, and we've got Hannah Berry from Greater Manchester Housing Action. Hannah, over to you.
Hello. Is my microphone working?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, cool. Thanks. So I'm happy to have been asked to say a few words on behalf of GMHA. We're a coalition of campaigners who actually came together just before the first mayoral elections in Greater Manchester, and the first term of office is just finishing now. And we wanted to use that moment of devolution 4 years ago to focus more attention on the region's growing housing crisis, which wasn't really getting much coverage or much attention to the causes and solutions at the time, despite the visible kind of symbol of the spiralling number of homeless people in the Manchester city centre, which at the same time was being surrounded by cranes with one high-rise block after another going up. And in terms of homelessness, Andy Burnham, the mayor, has had quite a high-profile attempt to tackle homelessness across the 10 boroughs, and yet we still have, as far as I can see from latest figures, the highest rate of homelessness in Northern England. And there's currently just short of 99,000 households in Greater Manchester on the housing waiting list. Manchester itself had a net loss of 12,000 homes between 1994 and 2019, obviously mostly through right to buy. And currently it has 13,000 people on the housing register, of whom 5,000 are considered in priority need. And that is before we see the surge that's going to be caused by the end of the stay and evictions and the whole everything that's happened through the pandemic. Some of you might have seen the BBC documentary Mantopia, the £1 billion property boom that was shown last year on BBC, which kind of set out supposedly to have a kind of neutral view of the impacts on different actors, different communities and people involved in the sort of eye of the storm. But it ended up creating a sense, we felt, that a developer-led model through which public land is transferred into private ownership and homes are effectively transferred from places to live into assets for the global and local elite is the only real game in town, and even something sort of admirable. And GMHA is really trying to challenge these narratives through our research and lobbying and campaigns, which we often do in coalition with other local groups and allies such as Acorn and the GM Tenants Union and the Greater Manchester Law Centre. Just now someone was mentioning the issue of affordable housing, and I just wanted to mention that of 24,000 homes that were built in Manchester city centre since 2012, only 151 of them are affordable, let alone for social rent. And the official 20% target for contributions under the sort of Section 26 is in fact only a starting point for negotiation. And there's all kinds of exemptions, such as building in an area that is deemed to have already enough affordable housing, or for where it would prejudice other regeneration objectives or financially undermine significant development proposals. So, you know, we really need a major change in the narrative as our social housing stock continues to deplete, and those who rent privately continue to face lack of affordability, poor conditions, no-fault evictions, and a lack of tenants' rights as elsewhere in the country. So the need for good quality affordable housing is a massive priority for Greater Manchester. And as GMHA, we're really keen to explore how the existence of 10,840 empty homes, as revealed by the research by Action on Empty Homes, can be part of that solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. I interrupted you. Somebody rang me during that. We're going to move on now to Tyrone Scott from Shelter.
Hi, yeah, I'm Tyrone Scott. I'm the London community organiser for Shelter, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I'm really pleased to be taking part in the Day of Action Homes today, which is a really important day. So thank you for inviting me, and thanks for the other speakers for speaking, and also for campaigning so hard to tackle the housing emergency, because we are in a housing emergency, and we cannot get out of it without delivering the social housing we desperately need. For generations, social housing played a vital role in meeting the housing needs of people across the country, giving millions a quality and dignity of life that insecure and unaffordable private renting could not. Today's England's much reduced stock of social housing is continuing to shrink, making it tightly rationed and unable to play the same role. Last year, we lost around 17,000 more social homes than we built. Combine this with rising house prices, and it's easy to see why more and more people have no option but to try getting by in insecure and unaffordable privately rented housing. From the Second World War up to 1980, we were building an average of 126,000 social homes a year and delivered 4.4 million homes. However, in the 1980s, it marked a major shift in social housing policy, with tenants being able to buy their home to buy, and that coupled with a rapid decline in social house building to replace these homes. And as a result, social homes have been sold off much faster than they've been replaced, and local authorities have been left with just a fraction of the social homes they once had to offer, which makes the need to repurpose all these empty homes in these areas even more desperate. In 2018 to 19, just 6,287 new social homes were delivered, nowhere near enough the 1.1 million people on their social housing waiting list. Social housing has long suffered from declining public investment, less support through the planning system, and rising land and development costs. And this means what little investment there is doesn't go far. Right now, the demand for social housing woefully outstrips supply, and this has had a significant impact on the lives of people worst affected by the housing emergency. It's the families stuck living in cramped temporary accommodation or unfit private rental properties, too scared of eviction to complain about the terrible living conditions. It's the people who have managed to get a social home but are forced to move miles from friends or family, or have had no choice but to accept a poor quality home that's unsuitable for their family's needs. And it's felt daily by the millions of people on the ever-growing waiting lists. There were over 250,000 people, homeless people, living in temporary accommodation in England during the first national lockdown. The number of homeless people living in temporary accommodation is the highest it's been in 14 years, and has increased by 83% across England in the last 10 years, which is equivalent to 115,000 more people. In the last year alone, the number of homeless people living in temporary accommodation increased by 6%, an additional 13,500 people. And we know these conditions of temporary accommodation can also be poor, overcrowded, and overpriced. And it's one of the many reasons it's so urgent we deliver more social homes. There are about 1.5 million fewer social homes today than there were in 1980. Simply put, not enough housing has been built or put back into use to meet the country's needs. Increasing numbers of households who would benefit from social home are being left to compete for a shrinking number of available properties, the quality of which has also suffered because of a lack of continued investment. Without more social homes, the country won't be able to escape the grip of the housing emergency, and more people will become stuck in unaffordable, crowded, and insecure housing. Government funding will continue to be spent on growing number of families covering the cost of unaffordable private rent through housing benefit, rather than investing in the bricks and mortar of new homes with guaranteed low rents. We urgently need to deliver the social homes to tackle the housing crisis, and I thank Action on NGOs for the opportunity to speak about this today.
Thank you very much, Tyrone. That was great. Thank you. And thanks to Shelter for sending you to speak. That's a really good support from that organisation. We've got, I've got a couple of comments online. I've got one from Jeanette Evans who says solidarity from London Renters Disability Caucus. That's really, really appreciated. And also we've got solidarity from Unite Community London and Eastern Region who have sponsored the event. So thanks to them for that. So we're now moving on to Islington where we have a live stream. Islington? Oh, it's good.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Can you hear us?
We can now. Keep going.
Can
Just
hear
hear you.
Great. Murat.
Right. Hi, everybody. This is Moyra from Islington Homes for All. Welcome to this day of action. If you look behind me here, it's an absolute disgrace that there are around 29 empty flats. These are 3 and 4 bedroom flats. What's even worse, that is in 2019, the Ministry of Justice were due to hand over these flats to Islington Council.
Oh dear.
We've been through this what's going on?
Yeah, go on.
Keep going.
So we will be building a campaign around this. We've now found out that the Ministry of Justice has handed this over to property developers. There are about 4 different property developers involved in this site. This is public land. The Ministry of Justice won't tell us how much they're selling the land for. However, the contracts have not yet been signed. So this is going to be an ongoing campaign. We'll put a big call out to people in Islington to get involved. And I think just finally, it's a disgrace that, you know, we have nearly 1 million people who are homeless in England. And yet the Tories last year, they awarded themselves over 2 million of public money putting in claims for their second homes. It's an absolute disgrace. At the same time, the local housing allowance has been frozen, yet rents continue to go up, pushing more and more poor families into poverty. So get involved. And we're just going to give you a quick hello to all the people who joined us today. Ministry of Justice! Shame on you! Ministry of Justice! Shame on you! Ministry of Justice! Shame on you! Empty homes! Fill them up! Empty homes! Fill them up! Ministry of Justice! Shame on you! Ministry of Justice! Shame on you! Empty homes! Fill them up!
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant from Islington there. Especially Islington Homes for All. Fantastic.
Yay!
Really
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going over to Newham. We're over to Newham now. Newham, you're on. Can't hear you, Newham.
First affected. But in 25.
We're one in 20.
Yeah, thank you. Can I start again?
Yes, start now. We can hear you there. We can hear that.
Yes, thank you so much. Where I come from, Newham, the borough which is the worst affected by the homelessness crisis in the whole of England. 1 in 25 households is classified as homeless. And we are broadcasting right now from the edge of the Haringey estate, right next to the new development of the Horseville Quarter, where only 35% of the 3,700 homes is so-called affordable housing. There is none that would be really social housing behind us. And that's why we came out to protest here. We want affordable and the right kind of housing for everyone. We don't want so-called affordable homes. We want social homes ideally built by councils. So that's going on in the background as well.
Yeah, your sound is gone. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry, but your sound is gone.
Oh gosh. Our council would like to house people. There are not this government. Oh gosh, I can't make it like. I don't understand what's going on now.
We can hear you now. We can hear you
Oh,
now.
thank you. Thank you. Sorry about this. We have the worst housing crisis right here in Newham, and 30,000 people are on the waiting list. Yet the homes being built around us are not affordable, only for the developers and those who are investing in them. We want to change this urgently, and that's why we came out to protest here at the Horseville Quarter. We're right next to Kennington Station. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, really sorry. Oh, that's a shame. Oh, thank you very much anyway, Newham. Thank you. Well, look, we've reached the end of our live streams and our speakers. And Tanya, I'm going to say a few words, and then Tanya, if you want to say a word. I think it's been a fantastic rally, and it's been a brilliant start. And there were live streams we couldn't bring you because we kind of ran out of time and there were technical issues, but it was going on all over the country. So we really thank everybody who joined us for this rally today, everybody who's been involved in this day of action and this first day of action. And we're going on to a second, and we're going to make this a big coalition that's going to make an impact on policy on housing. Over to you, Tanya.
Yeah, I guess I want to echo what you've said. It's a fantastic start to something that's going to be really impressive, I think, in terms of putting this on the national agenda, making the politicians listen, pay attention, and start putting in policies that will actually address this problem. But I think the key to this, as we've seen from the live streams, is getting people involved on the ground and getting local groups, to really support this campaign and to do actions in places where they can see those empty homes and they can see how a different kind of housing policy would work if those empty homes were actually filled. So I just want to put a shout out to Action on Empty Homes. It's a small charity, but it needs money to continue with this campaign, and we really want to see the organised workers movement get involved in this as well. So that means not just publicising, telling your members that this is happening, telling members that they can get involved in local actions, but also putting your money where your mouth is in terms of helping to fund this campaign, because this campaign needs to win. As I said before, this is a struggle for life against profit. There's no other struggle which, is more important. And it's up to the organised workers movement to step up and get involved with this. We've got fantastic support from Unite, and I really want to see the other unions getting involved as well. So if you're a member of a trade union, you want to put this on the agenda, please let us know. We're producing a model motion that can go to your branch, your region, and your national organisation for support and solidarity. And solidarity to all those groups that took part today. And I hope it's the beginning of something magnificent, and I'm sure it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we say goodbye to everybody. Thanks very much, Tanya. Bye.
Thank you.